Hello, I'm speaking with the Right Honourable Mark Francois, MP for Rayleigh and Wickford, who wrote our political viewpoint article for the May 25th edition of the Rayleigh Times. Hello, Mark. So you've entitled your article, What Should We Do with Mill Hall? I know that your thinking has advanced. Can you tell me something about the four options and how you see it all unfolding, please?
Yes, and I'm very grateful to the Rayleigh Times for giving me this opportunity to do this interview, because it's undoubtedly one of the biggest issues in my constituency. I laid out four potential ways forward on the Mill Hall issue, and perhaps I could go through them briefly in turn for you. The first one would be, in effect, to continue with the council's plan as it was originally envisaged, which would be to knock down the old Mill Hall, to build a smaller but more environmentally friendly and hopefully cheaper to run community facility next to the windmill, and to use the area where the old Mill Hall was to build effectively flats. I don't really think that's going to be much of a runner now. One, because I think the proposed new community facility would be very close to the windmill, which is a listed monument. And I also now understand that English Heritage are getting quite concerned about any kind of building in that area, because it's a conservation area. So it's looking increasingly unlikely that the council would get the relative permissions they needed to build out the scheme as they originally envisaged it, even if they wanted to. So it's looking as if the original plan is becoming less and less of a runner. And I certainly am getting more and more anxious about the idea of all these flats in a conservation area. So I think probably it isn't going to be option one. The second option, which I talked about, was to refurbish the existing Mill Hall. So there's obviously a question of what that would cost, and that in turn depends to what standard you refurbish it. Presumably we're not going to have gold leaf all over the walls. So I would like to know, what are the realistic costs of refurbishing the existing building to bring it up to 21st century standards? And as you and my constituents will know, because there was a lot of concern from the townsfolk of Rayleigh, and indeed from some people further afield, about the future of the Mill Hall, the council formally announced a review of this whole process, which is now due to report back in the autumn. And I, as the Member of Parliament, certainly intend to ensure that that is a genuine, thorough exercise that produces costed options that people have a chance to look at and comment on. So option two, if you like, is to refurbish. Option three would be to demolish the old building, because it's nearly 50 years old now and quite expensive to run, and to build a new replacement facility, perhaps ideally on the same site. I don't think English Heritage would be so alarmed by that. And I just, for want of a better name, I christened it the New Mill Hall. So let's just call it that for the moment. If you were to rebuild, if you were to build a new building, say, for instance, with photovoltaics in the roof, with modern technology and modern heating system, you could probably reduce the costs of running that building quite considerably. So in other words, a new Mill Hall, hopefully still of a sufficient size, but one that would be much cheaper to operate on a day-to-day basis. And then the fourth option, in effect, would be to scrap the whole thing and decide, you know, the game wasn't worth the candle. So there are a number of elements in this asset development strategy, but this is by far the most controversial. You could perhaps go ahead with some of the others, but not go ahead with this bit. So that, in a sense, is your fourth option. But you then still got a question of what do you do with the old Mill Hall, and At the moment, it's being used as an inoculation centre for vaccinations, and that's a brilliant temporary use bit. I had one of my jabs there. We're extreme. I'd just like to use this opportunity to thank all of the professional NHS staff and volunteers who've been doing a fantastic job there on behalf of the community, as indeed of a number of the other facilities and pharmacies too. So there's a great use for it in the short term, but hopefully before too much longer we come out of the lockdown. And then what do we do with it? One of the issues is it's been run by Fusion, who aren't really experts in running arts or community facilities. That they really run sports centres and leisure centres, and arguably they have some issues with that. So I don't think they're the best people to run the Mill Hall. So if we were to refurbish it and reopen it, or if we were to build a new one and open that, I think we need to get an operator to actually operate it who's got much more experience of dealing with facilities of those kinds. And I've had quite a lot of feedback from constituents who think Fusion aren't the right people to run the Mill Hall one way or another in the future. And I must say that I agree with that. So those are the sort of four options in a nutshell, with a sort of bit in brackets about I think we would need new operators, because unfortunately the old facility ran at a very considerable loss. I don't think most of my constituents would want to see their council tax going up significantly in order to have to cover that. So we want a vibrant 21st century quality arts and community facility, but we also want one ideally that washes its face. And so we need the right kind of operator with the right kind of skills in order to make that financially viable. That, I think, is my sort of summary of the four options.
In your article, you say that it's costing, or there's a loss of between £200,000 and £3,000 a year. That's a lot of money, isn't it, to lose?
Yeah. I mean, I got those figures from the council. I mean, that is a very significant amount of money, and I don't think you could afford to carry on, bearing that year on year. The part of the challenge is the Mill Hall was used for a number of quite large events traditionally. So, for instance, the Rayleigh Horticultural Society would have 3 shows a year when we didn't have COVID, and I would go along to some of those, and a few times in the past I've helped hand out the prizes and things like that. So it would be used for that. Also, Rayleigh Brass. I'm their president. I declare an interest. They've used that for concerts, many of them very popular down the years. So it's been used for some large-scale events, but much of the rest of the year, it hasn't been as busy. And, in some cases, it's gone for a fair while without really being heavily booked. So in order to make it pay for itself, what you need is to put on a program of events that genuinely interested the local community, so that financially it would wash its face. Now, I'm sure it's possible to do that, but I think the key in doing that is to get an operator that's experienced in knowing what the public want. And unfortunately, I don't think that's Fusion. So you need someone with much better experience, so that we can still hopefully have a facility that can cope with large events. And that means a new Mill Hall would have to be of a sufficient size, but also could have many smaller community-related events in the interim in order to keep the building nice and busy. So I think that's, being realistic. That's part of the challenge. There's some good news, I think, in relation to all of this. You asked if anything had sort of developed or moved on since I wrote the article. The answer is yes. Just a few days ago, Rochford District Council and Brentwood Borough Council announced a plan to work more closely together in the future. And as part of that, they're going to share a chief executive. We've had an acting managing director at Rochford for a while, but the idea now is to share a chief exec, and the person that will take that job is a man called Jonathan Stevenson. He's the current chief executive of Brentwood. He's been in post, I think, about 2.5 years. I've only met him once so far, which was at a social function, but I'm hoping to to get to know him a lot better. He will be the joint chief exec over both authorities. And that provides a good opportunity for someone to come in with a fresh pair of eyes and look at this whole issue right from the word go. So as I understand it, one of the biggest items in his in tray, if you want to use that phrase, will be the review of what to do with the Mill Hall, and he will be overseeing that review process. So I think that's very good, because I'm sure he will ensure that it's a proper and rigorous activity, and you've got the advantage, as I say, of a fresh pair of eyes. So I hope Jonathan Stevenson will now drive this review, and that will mean that we will get some answers in the autumn. How long can you, is the autumn? Well, we know what the official seasons are, but to my mind, that means we'll get an answer by October. I'd like to see the results of this review made public in October, so that then people can comment on those and the costings and the plans, and then we can move forward from there.
I know in the article you have said that you're keeping an open mind. Would I be right in sensing that your favour is with option 3?
Well, I don't think option 1 is really going to fly now, partly because of the objections of English heritage, and partly because it's clearly not what the townsfolk want. So I think if you're going to do a proper review, you've got to examine the option. But I think realistically, that's not going to be the answer. Option 2, refurbishing the Mill Hall, you could do that, but that could prove to be quite expensive. But I can't say much more on that until you know what the actual costings are. And it obviously depends on what standard you refurbish it to. There might be quite a lot of advantages to option 3, which is you demolish the old Mill Hall, and providing English heritage are happy, you rebuild a brand new building to a 21st century standard, effectively on the same site or very nearby to it. And that is designed from the get-go to be much cheaper to run while still providing all the facilities that the community needs. And you would pay for that over time, like, in a sense, taking out the mortgage on a house. So there might be quite a lot of advantages to option 3. But again, you need to see what the costs are, because you'd obviously have to pay A, for the cost of demolition, and then B, for the cost of construction. And that's not going to be nothing. And you've got to look at what the revenue costs would be. But if the actual cost of running it year on year is a lot cheaper than refurbishing and running the old Mill Hall, that might actually make quite a lot of sense.
I know you said you don't think Fusion is the right people to run it. The fact that it's been running at a loss of between 2,000 and 3,000 a year, would you put that wholly at their feet? Do you think that?
Well, I think it's nearer. I think it's nearer 200 to 300k a year, not 2,000 to 3,000. It's
sorry, my apologies. Do you think that it could have been, had there been, for instance, a Harvey Goldsmith equivalent promoter type person, organisation running the venue for the last however many years? Do you think it would have been able to break even prior to now? Do you think it really is Fusion that just because their experience and expertise is sport, do you think it really would have made a big difference?
Well, it might have done. I mean, this is a challenge for a lot of councils around the country, that they have similar type facilities, and a lot of them struggle to make them cost effective. So this is not by any means a problem unique to Rochford District Council and to the town of Rayleigh. That said, where it does work, the magic ingredient seems to be having an operator who really understand that sort of area of business, and are well attuned to what people want. So ideally, you'd need a mix to be able to cater for large events like Rayleigh Brass and the Rayleigh Horticultural Society and some others as well, but also have the building busy enough in the meantime, to be able, one, for it to be well used, and two, to generate enough revenue so that it basically washes its face. So no one's council tax has got to go up to pay for it. And some other councils around the country seem to manage it. So hopefully we could too. But the at the risk of hammering the nail, the really critical thing seems to be to get people in who've got real experience of doing that. There are quite a few organisations that do, but unfortunately, Fusion historically are not one of them. So I think we'd have to be realistic about that and look to get someone else to run it.
We've actually covered the whole of your political viewpoint article. You've updated and given us some breaking news as well. Is there anything else that you would like to speak about or that you would like to mention before we go?
Well, I just on this topic, I would like to say that as the local MP, I completely understand that this has caused a considerable amount of concern in Rayleigh. And that's why I intend to make sure that this is a genuine review process. And in that context, it's just good timing, that Rochford have brought in this new joint chief executive from Brentwood, who I understand is now basically going to oversee the review. So look, Rochford District Council is a debt-free council. It's one of the few councils of its size anywhere in the country that can say that. So our residents don't have to pay interest on the council's debts because it hasn't got any. The second thing, it has an award-winning 3-bin collection system. We've been the national champions at doorstep recycling with our 3-bin system several times in the last few years. These are all things we as local residents can be really proud of, but we've also got to try and ensure that we've got a 21st century arts and cultural facility going forward, and one way or another we need to do that. And that means, in summary, Rochford conduct a thorough review. They come up with accurate, realistic costings for the options. They consult with local residents on those options. Hopefully, we can form a consensus on the best way forward, and then we can get on with it. I think that's whatever people's politics, that's overwhelmingly what my constituents would like to see. And that's what I would like to see as the Member of Parliament. So let's get on with this review, and let's hope that the new chief executive is as good as his reputation suggests, because he comes very well recommended from Brentwood, and that he can come up with the goods.
Right. Well, I'll say goodbye. Take care, Mark.
Many thanks.
All the best.
You too, Mark.